What's going on, everybody? Dev Del Molino here, synthesizer of opinions, back with a think piece. And what am I thinking about today? I'm thinking about Kendrick Lamar. I'm thinking about whether or not Kendrick Lamar is a top-tier lyricist, whether that's in all-time respect or in just today's hip-hop landscape. I'm thinking about this because it comes off of the back of some rather controversial tweets from a well-revered rapper, though a well-revered rapper from the previous generation, Lupe Fiasco. And in this string of tweets, he basically is calling into question K.Dot's true blue lyricism and where that actually ranks amongst other people, his contemporaries, and people from the past. So to quote the tweet directly, Lupe says, K.Dot is not a top tier lyricist to me in my personal standards when it comes to punchlines and bars. His overall lyrics are good and stories phenomenal, but punchline entendre lyrically, I don't see it. Now, this was in response to a fan's tweet basically asking him, do you really think that Logic is better than Kendrick lyrically? So then yes, this would seem to suggest that Lupe believes Logic is a better lyricist than Kendrick. So let's hold on to that idea for a second. Then in a follow-up tweet in response to another fan who basically was saying that look out for Detox, a really, really old Kendrick song, would quote-unquote destroy any of Lupe's discography. Which, I don't know, if you think that, I would just maybe do more research. So Lupe's response to this was pretty interesting. He says, I've never been destroyed, and then continues to go on and sort of criticize again the Control verse that Kendrick did about like 4 or 5 years ago on the song Control by Big Sean. Hopefully you guys remember this taking place. It was a really big thing when it happened. Really swallowed up the internet for a few days. But basically Kendrick made this big splash by coming on a verse, spitting a bunch of bars, and then suddenly calling out all his contemporaries by name and basically saying hip-hop is a competition, so let's compete at J. Cole, at Big Sean, at Drake, at even like Tyler the Creator and Mac Miller. I remember he said, I got respect for you all, but I'm trying to murder you niggas. Now, since day one of that song existing, I've heard people say stuff like that song is trash, the beat is trash, that verse is trash, or the verse is overrated, overhyped, and Lupe has been one of those previous critics. So for him to bring this up again, kind of on an unrelated note too, is interesting to me. So what's my initial reaction to this? I have to look at this and say, especially on that last note about the Detox thing, it seems a little petty for you to be bringing this up again. We've already seen you discuss this particular topic and go at Kendrick or a subject that involves Kendrick in the way that you're doing it. So again, it just seems a little petty. It seems like there's something underneath those words, but I do have to say that I agree with Lupe on the words that he used in that first tweet. Kendrick's lyricism is not officially top tier. Now, this kind of a debate, this kind of a scenario raises a lot of questions as to how we're gonna actually assess the situation. So, first, we're gonna be taking a look into what it means when Lupe says top tier lyricism. We wanna know what that rubric is, the scale that he's grading people on, and then determine whether or not we think it's a realistic one or one that falls in line with our idea of lyricism. And we'll be able to do that by looking at some of the clues in that string of tweets that he sent out. He seemed to suggest a few rappers who would be top tier lyricists in his mind, so we can use those for a reference point. And we can also just take a look at Lupe Fiasco as a lyricist himself. Finally, at the end of these 2 points, I'm going to be responding to some comments that went up on my Instagram. If you don't know, I use my Instagram mostly to discuss hip-hop, to keep you guys updated on what's coming out week to week. This week I made a post about this very subject and was kind of asking for people's opinions so that I could use them in this video and respond to what they had to say as far as who's better between Lupe Fiasco and Kendrick Lamar, lyrically or just as an artist. I was also asking whether people thought Lupe Fiasco was correct in his line of thinking, where they would rank Kendrick, and those sorts of things. So this is where I do all my first updates on Dev Del Molino stuff, let you guys know when and where and how videos are coming out. And if you want to have one of your comments in my next think piece, make sure you follow me and make sure you're interacting with the posts. So let's look at and try to figure out what Lupe's criteria is for a top tier lyricist or a good lyricist. So again, in this tweet, he makes mention of Kendrick not meeting his particular standards. And then he goes on to say that Kendrick's storytelling is phenomenal. So that seems to suggest that maybe he's taking storytelling out of the picture when we're looking at lyrical ability and lyricism. And then he says, but punchline entendre, lyrically, I don't see it. Now that part is interesting. Punchline entendre. Punchlines being the very gratifying piece at the end of a bar or a rhyme or even a verse that ties everything together. It's the thing that makes every word that came before it worth hearing. Now, there's easy punchlines, there's very heavy-handed punchlines, and then there are more difficult ones. There are ones that are more subliminal, more layered. So when Lil Wayne says, real G's move in silence like lasagna, that's a heavy-handed punchline. It's a dope one, and for an artist like Lil Wayne, whose modern part of his career has been all punchlines, that's one of his better and more memorable ones. So that's a punchline in one sense, but to up the degree of difficulty, we can take a look at a bar from Lupe Fiasco, like balls from Galileo to lay low, ignorance that the world isn't ours, the gall, give them all showers. Tony found the fountain of youth in the mountain of powder, only to find truth in the fountain, drowning in power, surrounded with dollars. Again, this is a point where we can take a look at Lupe's lyricism and kind of figure out what exactly he's looking for in lyrical artists. Surely this is his most lyrical album, so he would be evoking his own standards on this one, I would think. So this particular series of bars that I read to you guys, I see as a punchy set of lines, but it's also very wordy. It does have the wordplay. It rhymes its bars in multiple places. The lyrics themselves have a high vocabulary and a dense subject matter. These are some of the things that I think he's looking for when it comes to the best of the very best. And then in this series of tweets, he sort of suggests that Logic is indeed a better lyricist than Kendrick Lamar. He explicitly makes reference to King Los and Aesop Rock as being kind of the cream of the crop. What I take from all of this is that Lupe Fiasco is looking at lyricism on a word-by-word basis. He's literally taking their bars or an excerpt of their rhymes and spreading them out on a piece of paper and then looking at how the words move from one to the next. Lupe is looking at lyricism from a very specific and isolated point of view. And I don't have a problem with this at all. I think there are so many different ways to be a dope rapper, especially today, that, why not be able to look at one specific, isolated, and essential piece of the art form and look at it like a sports stat. So I'm coming away from this feeling like whatever Lupe has in his mind that makes good lyricism is pretty much in line with how I think of good lyricism. So with that being said, now we take a Kendrick Lamar and we look at who he is lyrically and where does he end up ranking on maybe Lupe's ladder or my ladder. This is where the debate gets really interesting because this is also where the major misunderstanding or misconception of Kendrick Lamar as an artist, a rapper, a lyricist is taking place. Lupe Fiasco is both right and wrong when we look at what Kendrick Lamar is trying to achieve on the microphone versus what a Lupe or the other guys that he says is better than Kendrick are trying to achieve. I was talking to a group of people online about this very subject, and someone brought up an excellent point where they said that if you look at early Kendrick, mixtape Kendrick, he was much more wordplay driven than he is today. And it makes sense. Kendrick was young and fresh in the game. You spent all your life listening to other great rappers, and now you're trying to be one, and really the only way he had the idea of doing that at the time was just amping up the wordplay and lyricism. But that's not the Kendrick that we fell in love with. The critically acclaimed Kendrick Lamar is the Kendrick Lamar that has prioritized the narrative above anything and everything else. He will tell a story. He will tell a story from his point of view or somebody else's. He'll change his delivery. He will change the inflection of his tone, the volume of his voice. He will pay attention to so many different details just to deliver a certain message or feeling or idea. And he also does that with his words. I mean, let's not get it twisted here. Kendrick is a great lyricist. I just don't know if he is the best of the best, like an absolute elite. But what Kendrick has done so far in his career is really put a spin on the idea of what it takes to be a good writer in hip-hop. Again, he says so explicitly on the Section 80 album, the song Po Man's Dreams, a particular favorite of mine, and I love this line, I always have. And don't call me lyrical, because really I'm just a nigga that's evil and spiritual. I know some rappers using big words to make their similes curve, my simplest shit be more pivotal. So this, to me, again, is an explicit declaration of his unconventional lyricism. And where I ultimately sit with this subject is that Lupe is not wrong in the words that he chose to use, but I do think when you break Kendrick down into the lyrical aspects that most other people who are achieving at a high level of lyricism, he's underneath that. But then the Lupe argument is also kind of almost ironically short-sighted to the notion that Kendrick is deliberately trying to change how we perceive lyricists and lyricism to be. So I don't think Kendrick is a top-tier lyricist either. I would say that I still side with Lupe on the notion that people like King Los, A$AP Rock, Logic are better lyricists than Kendrick is. Again, you gotta kind of look at a King Los and go, well, lyrics is really his only appeal. To have amassed the kind of fan base that he has and the notoriety for his lyrical ability that he does, I mean, he better be a pretty damn good lyricist. Probably a little bit better than Kendrick Lamar is. And same goes for Logic. I know Logic is kind of a super mega star right now, and I know we give him grief for a myriad of different reasons, but, I mean, that is his wheelhouse. It's the reason why he is as popular as he is today. The dude can spit. A$AP Rock is kind of undebatable for me. He is likely the best of the best, but even off the top of my head, there are a handful of artists still working today that are better lyricists in my opinion. So like a Jay Electronica, Andre 3000, even like a Sci-Hi the Prince, Earl Sweatshirt, Lupe Fiasco would be another one. I would go as far to say that Kendrick isn't even the best lyricist on his own record label. Ab-Soul certainly has him beat on pretty much all fronts when it comes to lyricism, true blue lyricism. And we reach back into previous generations, and I think people like Jay, Nas, M, Biggie are all considerably better lyricists than Kendrick is. So let's go ahead and knock out these Instagram comment opinions. Again, 40ounces.of.dev. Go follow me on Instagram right now. That's where I post everything Dev Del Molino, and you can be on the next one of these videos, like the J. Michael is. J. Michael says, there is no rule book on how to rap. True. He can have his opinion, but his opinion is wrong. Lupe, that is. Logic is absolutely nowhere near Kendrick, and I like Logic. King Los exclusively writes bars. Kendrick makes classic albums. Yeah, that's obviously totally true. That's kind of the point. Kendrick has so many other pieces to the pie that most rappers who have a lyrical ability better than him could ever have. Again, Kendrick's lyricism is really, really great. It's just that if you happen to have phenomenal lyricism, it's more likely that you are a specialty rapper than you are an all-around kind of rapper like Kendrick is. It's the reason why he's as popular and well-respected as he is today. Calico C says, punchline rap is fun. We all love 2000s Lil Wayne. I know I do. Kendrick doesn't have to touch that to be the GOAT, though. Many rappers rely on subpar or easy punchlines as a crutch. Yes, totally true. I'm actually going to use this idea to springboard to another comment on this whole scenario. Lupe takes this kind of a shot at Kendrick Lamar, and a lot of fans I saw responded to this pretty acrimoniously and were kind of coming at Lupe's neck for, saying something about the Messiah, Kendrick Lamar, basically. And I think that's honestly because at this point in hip-hop, we're not necessarily spoiled with great lyricism, particularly in popular music. So when someone goes at Kendrick and calls his lyricism or his rapping ability into question, I think people kind of get this idea that Kendrick can do no wrong and everything that Kendrick does is so amazing and calculated, when in reality that's not always true. I think Lupe has every right to observe the opinion that he has, and it should hold weight. He's one of the best lyricists that I've ever heard in my time listening to hip-hop music. Okay, so finally, my man Jai from Brooklyn, he says, Lupe is more lyrical, Kendrick is the better artist overall. And yeah, that's really the main point I want to drive home here at the end of the day, is that Kendrick is on another level from any one of his contemporaries and from a lot of the people that have come before him and will come after him. It's not about how the words were put together for Kendrick. It's about how the words are delivered to the listener. He thinks so much bigger and so much further ahead than so many other rappers will ever even try to do. And yes, he's not a top tier lyricist, and that's okay. He's a great lyricist, and he's great at so many other things. Lupe's not necessarily wrong, but Kendrick doesn't really need anyone's approval. If he did, he really wouldn't be where he is today. So that's going to be it for me. I have been Dev Del Molino. You guys have been so wonderful for watching and sending in comments for me to respond to. Again, 40ounces.of.dev, at Dev Del Molino on Twitter. If you want to catch up with me, those are the places that you can do that at. And yeah, that's all I got for today. Just remember, art without favor is a windmill without wind. Dev Del Molino,